For as long as you've been alive, you've been surrounded by a single promise that somewhere out there is a secret to getting rich, a hidden strategy, a perfect investment, a moment that changes everything. So let me tell you what researchers actually found when they studied hundreds of self-made millionaires up close, for years at a time. They found a pattern, the same small handful of habits, showing up again and again in person after person who built real wealth from nothing. And here's the strange part, the part that makes this so hard to accept. Those habits are almost unbelievably boring. So boring that most people hear them, feel a little flash of disappointment, and go right back to searching for something more exciting. And that flash of disappointment, that's the whole reason they stay broke. Because the single most powerful wealth-building habit there is happens to be one you already know about, and you are almost certainly ignoring it right now, today. We'll get to it. But to understand why it works, you first have to understand why your own brain is fighting you. Here's the problem. You are wired to believe that wealth comes from a moment, the lucky break, the viral idea, the one perfect stock you buy at exactly the right time. It's a great story, and stories are how we make sense of the world. But the data tells a completely different story, and it starts with a number that should stop you in your tracks. A researcher named Thomas Corley spent 5 years studying the daily lives of self-made millionaires. And the largest group of them, the ones who simply saved and invested their way to wealth, shared something almost no one wants to hear. On average, it took them 32 years. 32 years. Not a moment, not a lucky trade. 3 decades of quiet, unremarkable, repeated action. They didn't get rich in a flash of genius. They got rich in monthly deposits, which means the secret everyone is searching for is real. But it's the opposite of a secret. There's no hidden door. There's just a long, boring hallway that almost nobody is willing to walk down. So the real question isn't, what's the secret? The real question is, what did these people actually do over and over for 32 years? Because whatever it was, it worked with almost mechanical reliability. And it turns out the first thing they did is something you could start this week. Let's talk about how normal people handle their money first, because the contrast is everything. Most people, when the paycheck lands, do this. They pay the rent, the bills, the subscriptions, the dinners out, and then if anything is left over at the end of the month, they save it. And here's what happens every single time. Nothing is ever left over. The month always finds a way to eat the whole paycheck. So the saving never happens. Month after month, year after year. The wealthy do the exact reverse. And this one flip is the foundation everything else is built on. They pay themselves first. The moment money comes in, a slice is taken off the top and set aside before a single bill is paid. They treat their savings not as the leftover, but as the most important bill they owe each month. A bill to their own future. And it is not a small slice. In Corley's study, 95% of these self-made millionaires were saving 20% or more of their income. Not what was left, 20%, straight off the top, first. But if you've ever tried this, you already know there's a problem. Because paying yourself first still relies on willpower, and willpower is a battery that drains. Some months you're disciplined. Some months there's a holiday, a sale, a rough week, and the discipline quietly slips. So the wealthy did something clever, something that makes this almost impossible to fail at, and it's so simple it feels like it shouldn't matter. They removed willpower from the equation entirely. They automated it, They set it up once so that the money moves on its own the day the paycheck arrives. A fixed amount is automatically pulled into savings and investments before they ever see it, ever touch it, ever get the chance to spend it. And this is the habit I promised you at the very start, the most powerful one, the one you already know about and are probably ignoring. It isn't glamorous. It's a single afternoon of setting up an automatic transfer. But it changes everything because it turns a decision you'd have to win every single month into a decision you make one time and then never again. The discipline becomes a machine, and a machine doesn't get tired or tempted or talked out of it. So now the money is flowing out automatically, quietly building in the background. But saving alone doesn't make anyone rich, which brings us to the question everyone's been waiting for, the exciting part. Where do they put it? And this is where almost everyone guesses wrong, because when you picture how the rich invest, you probably imagine something thrilling. Secret hedge funds, explosive stock picks, getting in early on the next big thing before everyone else. The reality is so dull, it's almost funny. A study by the National Bureau of Economic Research found that only about 10% of millionaires put their money into hedge funds, venture capital, or exotic private deals. The overwhelming majority use the single most boring investment tool that exists, a low-cost index fund. The same unremarkable fund available to absolutely everyone watching this, including you. We actually watched this play out on this channel when Warren Buffett bet $1 million that a plain index fund would beat a room full of elite hedge fund managers. He won easily. The boring option didn't just compete with the exciting one, it crushed it. But here's the twist inside the twist. Even the fund isn't the magic. It never was, because you could put money into that exact index fund and get nothing remarkable if you only did it for a year, or 2, or 5. The fund is just the vehicle, the real engine, the thing that actually turns modest monthly deposits into a fortune is the one ingredient nobody can shortcut: time. Remember those 32 years? This is where they do their work. This is compounding the same quiet force we've explored before, where your money earns money, and then that money earns money, snowballing slowly at first, and then astonishingly fast. But it only reaches the astonishing part if you leave it alone for decades, which means the boring part showing up every single month for 30 years, and doing the same unremarkable thing while nothing visibly happens that isn't the price you pay for the wealth. That boring consistency is the wealth. It's the whole thing. And now you can see why these habits feel so boring. Because boredom, in this context, is just another word for consistency. And consistency, repeated across decades, is the entire game. But all of this, the saving, the automating, the patient investing, can be quietly destroyed by one thing. And guarding against it is the last habit, the one that protects everything else. The thread is your own rising income. Because here's what usually happens the moment someone starts earning more. Their spending rises to match it. A nicer car, a bigger place, and the gap between what they earn and what they keep stays exactly where it was at zero. The wealthy refuse to let this happen. In the largest study of American millionaires ever done, 94% said they live on less than they make. Nearly a third of them drive ordinary cars like Toyotas and Hondas. Only a tiny fraction drive anything luxurious. We did a whole video on this, on how the genuinely wealthy are usually invisible because they're not spending their money trying to look wealthy. They protect the gap between earning and spending with everything they have, because that gap is the raw material of every dollar they'll ever invest. So there it is, the entire boring machine. Pay yourself first, automate it, Pour it into something dull and proven. Leave it alone for decades and never let your spending catch up to your income. But before you go set all this up, I have to be honest with you, the way we always are here, because there's a version of this video that would be lying to you. These habits are not a magic guarantee. And I need to say clearly what almost no channel will. First, for a great many people, just save 20% is not boring advice. It's impossible advice. When wages have barely moved and rent and groceries have exploded, telling someone to save a fifth of their income can be like telling them to just breathe underwater. These habits work best for people who already have some room to breathe, and pretending otherwise is dishonest. Second, there's a trap hiding in this entire genre of research. We study the millionaires who made it and find that they were frugal and consistent. But we don't study the millions of people who were just as frugal, just as consistent, and never became wealthy because of bad luck, bad health, or simply where they were born. Frugality improves your odds. It does not bend reality. Even the researcher behind these habits says plainly that being frugal on its own will not make you rich. And third, 32 years is a long time. That's the part that never fits on a thumbnail. This is not a life hack. It's a lifelong practice, and some of the people who do everything right still won't cross the finish line. So these habits aren't a promise. They're a set of odds you can quietly tilt in your favor, which is worth doing, but only if you're honest about what it is. So let's come back to the strangest question of all. Why are the habits that build wealth so boring? Because that can't be an accident, and it isn't. Here's the real answer, and it reframes this entire video. They're boring on purpose. The boredom isn't a flaw in the system. The boredom is the system. Think about every way people destroy their wealth. The exciting stock tip, the big impulsive bet, the thrilling upgrade to a lifestyle they can't afford. Almost every financial disaster begins as something exciting. Excitement, when it comes to money, is usually the sound of a mistake being made. So what the wealthy figured out, whether they knew it or not, was this. They made wealth building so boring, so automatic, so mechanical, that it became impossible to sabotage with their own emotions. They took the most dangerous variable in any financial plan, the human being running it, with all their impulses and their hunger for excitement, and they engineered that variable out of the equation. The habits are boring because they're designed to protect you from yourself, and that's the secret you already knew when this video started. The most powerful wealth-building habit isn't a clever trick. It's the simple, unglamorous willingness to be bored, to do the same quiet, unremarkable thing, month after month, for years, while everyone around you chases the next exciting thing and ends up with nothing to show for it. This is what the families who keep their wealth for generations quietly pass down. It's the difference between the money that stays and the money that slips away. And the most beautiful part is how available it is. You don't need a special talent or a windfall or permission. You just need to be willing to do something boring, starting today, and to keep doing it long after it stops feeling exciting, which is almost immediately. Be boring. It might be the most valuable financial decision you ever make. Next time on this channel, we're looking at the other side of that patience, what actually happens year by year inside your mind and your bank account in the 10 years after you finally start.